What's going on, everyone? I've been wanting to sit down and do this video for a while. I finally made the time to do it today. When I first started working in the shop and doing 3D shoots, a big question from people was what sight to use, or how do you shoot out further for those long 70, 80, 90, 100 plus yard shots. When I first started shooting 3Ds, I was using just a 5-pin sight, not movable, so you had your 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60 yard pin as known distances. Anything past that, you would have to figure out the trajectory or gap your pin somehow to know to where your arrow would drop in there at that distance if you didn't have a single pin slider or a multi-pin slider. So what I've been asked quite a few times at a 3D shoot or help people out is pin gapping. So if you got 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 yards, but you're trying to shoot out to 80, 90 yards, you're going to have to try to figure out somehow to hold and aim with your 60 yard pin higher so your arrow will drop into the correct distance it needs to be at. And going to multiple total archery challenges and Mountain Archery Fest, you're going to get those long range shots if you want to take them at 80, 90, 100 plus yards. Super fun. I recommend everyone to try it at some point because everyone's capable of doing it. You just got to execute the shot, have the right gear set up, and practice. It's pretty much it. Anyone's capable of doing it. I've run into a lot of people at 3D shoots who had 3 5-pin setups that weren't sliders. Didn't know they're going to get into a 100-yard shot, 80-yard shot, and go out there with their furthest pin being, 60 yards or something like that. So I've had to explain to a few people how to pin gap or hold over your target to let that trajectory of your arrow fall into where it needs to be past your furthest pin if you don't have a slider. So the first time I ever had to shoot out past 60 yards, I wasn't quite sure exactly where to aim because it was a 110 yard shot. It was at a little 3D shoot. Everyone shot at this target for a pile of money, and there's these guys with a single pin sight, 100 yards, that were able to hold dead on with their pin. So it took a shot or two at that time for me to figure out, the distance of my arrow to drop in with a 5-pin setup. So if you think you got 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 yard pins with a 5-pin setup, and the further those pins go out in distance, the more they spread. So your 20 and 30 will be closer than your 50 and 60 will be. Alrighty, so let's say your sight is a 5-pin sight, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. I'm using this option sight I have here as an example. The green 20, first orange 30, red 40, 50, 60, and then there's a floater there at the bottom, which I can get into a little more later. So right now I'm holding the bottom orange 1 6-yard pin on the vitals of the elk. But if this was a 3D target or an animal that was further than 60 yards and you did not have a slider pin, there's some way you're going to have to figure out how your arrow is going to reach. So in this photo, it shows my 60-yard pin, the orange pin, being in the vital area to kill the animal, and the 40-yard pin being the red one at the top of the back. So if I wanted to shoot this animal for 80 yards, I'd take the 60-yard pin and put it at the top of the back where the red pin is, my 40-yard pin. I'm using the reference of 20 yards gap in between those two pins to reference where I'll hold for a longer shot. As I mentioned earlier, the further out your pins get in distance, the bigger the gap. So holding slightly over the back will get you pretty close to where you need to be in the kill zone. So if you're trying to make a 100-yard shot with a 5-pin sight, my 60-yard pin is currently near the heart and the vitals. My 20-yard pin is way above the back near the tip of the antler. The yardage gap between my 20-yard pin and my 60-yard pin is 40 yards, which is the same distance between 60 and 100 yards. But again, the further you go out on distance, the more your pins spread out and gap. So I need to hold my 60-yard pin slightly higher than where my 20-yard pin sits at the top of the antler. So I always get the question, or I've got the question a lot in the past from people setting up their first bow or getting into archery, what sight to run, what's the best sight? There's a lot of good options, a lot of very good sights to pick from. This is one of my recommendations I like because it gives you a lot of versatility. It's high quality, dependable, and made with high craftsmanship. 3D season's coming up. You don't want to change your hunting setup. This is a good opportunity to try out the option sight. So how I have this one set up, I have my 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 yard pin, and then this one here is a floater, which I use a sight tape to get to my distance. So initially, I got this sight, and I had one arrow weight and setup to use off this sight. The more I started shooting and doing different hunts, different 3D shoots, I realized I liked having a heavy arrow to hunt big game animal and a lighter arrow to do 3Ds. So what I ended up doing was setting and sighting in my fixed pins, my 5, 20 through 60, with a heavier arrow, and then you can flip those guys out of the way, and with the single pin that uses a sight tape, I sighted in with a lighter arrow. So I gotta be very careful I don't use a heavy arrow in my quiver or grab the wrong arrow on the sight tape or the light arrow with my heavy arrow sight in pins. So usually I'll put a different colored nock or different fletchings or something for that matter. But I have big game heavy arrows, and then I have a little bit further out pin if I need it, grouse arrow, or I could put an expandable on there. So if I want to take a little bit, further out to 80, 75, 80, 90, 3D shoots going out, if you can get out past 100, then you get that lighter arrow, but you also get your heavy game, heavy arrow set up there. This also allows you to have a clearer sight picture on a 3D target or something because you're only focusing on that one single pin versus the clutter of 5 or 6 pins. One thing I like about having 5 pins on a sight is during a hunting situation, the elk are moving during the rut, hogs in Texas, stuff is moving. It's always moving around in motion. You're in motion, you're walking the mountains, you're walking the hills, and that quick reference from 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 is very helpful without having to rearrange or move your slider pin. When going to a 3D shoot or sitting in the tree stand, when you may have time to dial it into the exact distance, the single pin's also a good option. So it gives me lots of versatility and options there on my bow without switching sights or switching my whole entire archery bow setup. Great sight. This is the option sight again. Check it out. It's been a great sight for my bow. This is magnetic here, so it sticks, won't flip out. I've taken a good spill on it, full body weight. The very next shot out of Tull Archery was right on the money at 70 plus yards, so very good sight. I definitely recommend it, and held up, so definitely give this one a look here.